Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Planet Sport, episode 4. Of course, I am joined by Sam Ketch and
Hello.
Matthew Robinson.
Hello.
We're coming towards the end of lockdown now. I'm actually a little bit sad that it's ending. It's been quite nice just being at home and doing nothing. But of course, we are again sponsored by Sisters Stopping Suicide, who, of course, do an amazing job supporting people who are going through troubles at the moment. And, make sure to check them out on Instagram. I think you can find them. They've got a new Instagram tag, which is one of the reasons why we're promoting them again, just to update people. So instead of at It's Okay to Talk, they have now changed it to at Sisters Stopping Suicide. So it's no capitals, no space marks or anything like that. Pretty decent. They're a fantastic sponsor, and I'm more than happy to support them. I think that what they align very much with what I stand for. So, if we move on to the sports news, we'll start off with Sam Ketch, believe it or not. We have our own little celebrity, ladies and gentlemen. He has been taking part in a tennis challenge, which he suffered through many hours, but I'm sure that he'll be better placed to explain it. So, Sam, the stage is all yours.
Yeah, so a week ago today, we in about 40 minutes, we were finishing up. Mike Wells, who is a club member at my local club, who I'm on the committee for, volunteered to do a 24-hour tennis match. So every hour there was a new opponent. You just played for the full time. It wasn't like, limited amount of games or anything. And I stayed the entire time through, making sure there was, photos to go with each player, some photos as the things were going along. We raised about £4,000 to renovate the clubhouse at the club. So we've now got some more plans going. Unfortunately, I opened my big mouth just as Mike did, and I said that I would do the next one, which is going to be exercise bike, non-stop cycling, doing Land's End to John O'Groats, so 874 miles. It's all in, part of the thing about sport is not just the elite level, but also the very local stuff, the community. It's a members run, members owned tennis club. It's not, it's not like some big billionaire has pumped loads of money in and we can just do it. We run year on year at a loss, if not making ends meet. It's subscription funds are what drives the club to keep money in the bank. Everything else is spent doing things up, fixing problems. So we're all quite happy, doing things like this where, it keeps the community together. It brings in people from outside, especially something that lockdown has shown us. Obviously, tennis is one of the first things that was allowed to be back, and, cross households could go and meet up and play. But something that we've seen is how the lockdown, almost how this virus has put people together, because the indoor centres couldn't open up and still can't. So they've come down to do their coaching and playing at our club, which has obviously brought in more money, more people. And I think that's something that hopefully we will remember going forward, is just how important community clubs, community centres are for the local people. As much as sport is about the top level, watching Roger Federer, Hull City, whatever, it's about the local stuff for the common people like us. We have to engage with what is in our village as opposed to the Premier League. And I think that hopefully something we'll all learn from this is about maybe helping out local, not just, piling all of our money into Sky, BT and the rest.
Dude, I'm still laughing at the fact he said Hull City top level.
We've just gone 2-0 up against Birmingham. We've just gone 2-0 up, so I'll hear none of that.
Birmingham,
well, speaking of Birmingham, actually, I did an article on Jude Bellingham, who's one of their wonder kids. So if anyone wants to read that, it's on 24/7 Football. So nice little plug there. Cheers for that, Sam. If we go on to the football, then might as well. Premier League fixtures. There were as many of them, and obviously there was plenty of games played up and down the country. I'm losing my mind. So obviously there's been plenty of changes. And one of the big changes is now, well, it's not really a surprise or a change, really, is that Liverpool, of course, won the Premier League to the annoyance of the entire country. And it really is 2020, isn't it? It's the apocalyptic year. Leeds could be going up. Liverpool won the league. It's been a year of many surprises, I guess. Now, a lot of people will try and take this off Liverpool, but they've clearly been the best team this season, haven't they? And they thoroughly deserve the title.
They have. I think that one of the things about the 30-year wait is the cycle of football in that time. It's so weird seeing that they obviously dropped to lows, they finished second a couple of times, but throughout all of it, there's been that constant thing of another team would be dominating. And it was about time, probably, that a club as big in stature and history as Liverpool had their time, because when Man City and Chelsea have overtaken them in that 30-year period and won more titles, you do have to somewhat question what was going on. But credit to them, they were the best team in the league this season. I still don't think they're the best squad. I still don't think they play the best brand of football, but they've put what they've got and how they play together and just cruised it this season.
Yeah, I think it's really well deserved. I mean, they've got that team morale. They all seem to get on well. They get on with the manager. The sort of atmosphere that they've got around the club at the moment is possibly one of the most key things to, I think, them winning this year. I mean, after lockdown, we've seen them come back and play Crystal Palace, beat them, 4-0 was it? And Crystal Palace didn't have a single touch in their box. I mean, that sort of dominance is what they've showed all season, and I mean, it's thoroughly deserved.
Yeah, I think plenty of people will obviously, I've seen plenty of Man United fans try and sort of take it off them, but
yeah,
at the end of the day, you just got to accept that they've been one of the best teams. Of course, the title was sealed with Chelsea beating Manchester City. Really, really big result for Chelsea. I think we'll talk about the Champions League race at the moment, because that's turning out to be a really interesting storyline, I guess, of the season. But yeah, superb from Chelsea. But I think that game pretty much summarises Man City this season. Brilliant going forward. Maybe not as clinical as they are, but defensively they just looked so shaky.
Yeah, that Pulisic goal was especially highlighting Benjamin Mendy's the opposite of prowess. The word doesn't come to me, but he's certainly not shy of making mistakes. There's a point there where you see him and Gundogan both sort of saying, "You take it." They leave the ball. Pulisic nicks it, and they've still got the numbers on him. There's a third Man City defender catching up to the counter-attack, and for some reason he chooses to dive in and try and nick the ball off him near the halfway line, and it just leads to the goal. I mean, there is a big question mark over some of the spending Pep Guardiola has done. It's, partially a criticism of him is he can go to these clubs and spend a lot of money bringing in whoever he wants, because when they fail, he could just buy someone to replace them and sell whoever it is on at a loss. I mean, he bought João Cancelo in the summer and we've barely seen him, and that was a £60 million fullback, and you don't really make those signings unless you've got that, the ability to do so. You don't see Liverpool, Man United, Chelsea spending 60 million on a fullback to sit on the bench.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Man City after this, I mean, they started off all right with against Arsenal, was it 3-0 or something? Then they won 5-0 against Burnley when we saw that something which I'm sure we'll touch on later, the banner which went across. But then in the game against Chelsea, they just didn't really turn up. I mean, and the pressure was on them because they needed to win, to keep the hopes alive. And it just didn't come together with them. And then they got someone sent off in the second half, and the wheels just fell off.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty up and down campaign for Manchester City, and they've lost so many games compared to last time out, and it's been a huge difference, really. But if we move on from Man City to Chelsea, of course, Chelsea under Frank Lampard, they've blooded through young players. Really impressive performance again for them against City. And of course, they've got Ziyech and Werner on the way as well for next year. I mean, what do we make of them? I guess they could really be a team that could challenge next season.
They're definitely heading that way. It's still that thing of, is it a year too soon? I mean, it's always the conversation with young players, how long before they're equipped to deal with that elite top of the table mentality of, you make a mistake, you have to go and correct it. Every game matters. Every game has to be 3 points. There's been a few too many times this season. Someone like Tomori, Mount, Abraham, they've made mistakes, and there's not that same impetus that there is perhaps from the Liverpool team, like when Van Dijk might make a mistake or when Henderson will make one. It just isn't that same drive to go and correct it, and that's something they have to learn as they get older as footballers. And they'll challenge, but I think they'll fade off as they have this season at points and at parts during the season, and they'll finish third, fourth again, but they won't be, in that race until the last 8 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been good for Liverpool this year has been the momentum that they've gained over the last couple of years. It's kind of been getting better and better. And Chelsea is starting to get that momentum up a little bit. But will they have what it takes next season to compete for the title with a young squad, and with Frank Lampard only coming in this year? Was it? It's going to be a challenge for them, I think, to compete with the likes of Liverpool, Man City, etc. To compete for the title next season. I'm just not convinced that they've got it. I think they'll do all right, but I don't think they'll compete for the title.
Well, of course, one of the big competing points this season is the Champions League race. Of course, we don't really know if 5th place will be enough, but we can only sort of, I guess, hope that City's ban will be upheld at least for a season, which of course brings the Champions League place down to that 5th place, which a lot of teams are sort of vying for at the moment. And the team that currently sit there, if I am correct in saying, I think I haven't actually checked.
Yes, it's you.
It's Wolves. Now, of course, Chelsea, Manchester United, Wolves, potentially Spurs, Sheffield United possibly, but of course Manchester United beat Sheffield United 3-0. So you'd have to say that they're probably not. They've probably dropped off a bit. Sheffield United. I mean, they got battered 3-0 by Newcastle as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of Chelsea, Manchester United, and Wolves, which of those teams would you sort of consider as having sort of the best chance?
Manchester United. I think since Fernandes has come in, they've looked a different animal. The only problem for them is now that they have Rashford back, which has been a massive boost to them that they didn't have, obviously, 3 months ago when football stopped. They have to keep Rashford, Martial, Greenwood fit. And, I mean, we saw how they played against Sheffield United. If they can do that every week, or every game that's left, then they're going to be pretty unstoppable. Obviously, that's a different conversation when they play a Man City or a Liverpool and they're up against elite defenders. I would like to see the 3 of them against that Liverpool defence to see how they played off. But, I mean, Martial scoring a hat-trick is pretty unbelievable. I didn't think I'd ever see the day that he scored a hat-trick. He usually gets to 2 and starts coasting. So,
well, it's actually the first hat-trick a Manchester United player has scored since Sir Alex Ferguson retired. So, I mean, that sort of goes to show the drop-off in quality that United have had. But what would you agree with Sam there, Matt?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I was quite good about that hat trick. Took Martial out of my fantasy team. Like
Yeah.
sort of in the transfer, I transferred him in and then was like, not sure about him. He's not done well this season. Took him out. What's he going to do? Scores a hat trick. Absolutely fuming. But yeah, I agree with this point about Fernandez. I mean, I've got him in my fantasy team as well. He's been looking good last few games. He's been scoring well, and I think he's really going to bring something to the team. And they've got, I mean, they're in sixth position now, so they need to get to at least fifth to potentially get a place, possibly fourth, depending on how things turn out. So they're really going to be going for it. Same with Wolves to try and keep that spot that they've got at the moment. But for me, I think Chelsea will get in, and I think Man United will as well. Sorry to say that, Tom.
No, to be honest, I'd have to agree. I think that Pogba coming back is a massive boost for United. He, as much as he has off the field problems, he just elevates them to such a different team when he plays his A game. As we've seen many times for France, some of the games and performances he puts in for France just, show how good of a player he really is. And I think it's sort of gone unnoticed, but him and Fernandes in midfield, yeah, really solid options. And to be honest, they do have a very good attack. Martial and Rashford are both on 14 goals each. Greenwood is a superb young player. They've got a good defence. They've got a good team. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, I think, is actually starting to get a good bit of momentum with this team. So, yeah, no, I would have to agree in saying Chelsea and Manchester United. I think Wolves could potentially be caught out with a lack of goals, which sounds a bit unusual, but we've won our first 3 games 2-0, 1-0, and then 1-0 again today. So, my only worry for Wolves would be if we have an off day, we might find goals harder to come by at some points. But I think Sheffield United, disappointing for them, obviously that 3-0 defeat to Manchester United, but a solid season for them nonetheless anyway.
Yeah, I think that there's been, other than Sheffield United, there's also been Leicester who've dropped off since the turn of the year, which feels so long ago, obviously. But I think I was reading something, Sheffield United in 2020 have scored less goals than Liverpool have scored since football came back, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, which is incredible. Like, both Liverpool scoring that many goals, that they've scored more than Sheffield United this year in 3 games, but also the fact that Sheffield United are still competing, still do have a chance at European football. But yeah, they've just fallen off. A great season, obviously, for a club that nobody really touted to do this, but the fact that they were so good and are now showing this kind of form, it does make me wonder how next season will play out if Chris Wilder can't get them back to the form they showed, at least temporarily, during the first half of the season.
Yeah, a bit of a disappointing drop-off for them. But, of course, the relegation battle is as strong as ever. Aston Villa, Bournemouth, who else is there? West Ham. I mean, I to be honest, I actually think Watford as well. I think West Ham could go down this season. They haven't looked great at all. David Moyes, I think, is he really the man to save them? I don't know. He hasn't really had much of a chance to get his own players in. But, I mean, Jared Bowen is a bit of a nothing player, really. So, I don't know. It's a tough one. I mean, who could you see really struggling to stay up?
Any of them.
Yeah, I mean, Norwich are gone, aren't they? They're right at the bottom by a game or 2 or something like that. And then we've got the next 4, I think, they're on sort of similar points. And yeah, I mean, Bournemouth, Villa, they've not looked good, especially after this restart. And as you say, West Ham, I mean, Watford might get lucky because they've not been doing too well, but are they the best of the worst?
Yes, I think it might be a case of them. They just, all of the teams down those positions just keep losing games, so no one ever actually gains any ground. I do think. I think Villa could stay up. Actually, I think they looked decent. I think they just struggle in the final third quite a lot. To be honest, we've played in our first 3 games. I'll go back to Wolves, but 3 of the teams we've played, right? So we've played West Ham, Bournemouth, and Villa so far. 3 of the teams in the relegation battle, none of them have looked good at all. They've looked so average going forward. Not they're solid, but then they're not. They don't offer anything really. They don't seem to have much up front. So I do think that there's been. I do think that it'll be a case of just who loses the least amount of games. I mean, have there been any surprises for you guys in terms of teams coming back?
Just Sheffield United, that they've been so poor, really. I did think that the break might have helped them. They might have had that sort of Wilder might have had the chance to drill the old mentality back into them, but it does seem to have been lost a little bit in perhaps complacency at how well they did the first 19, 20 games of the season.
I mean, that first Arsenal game back as well, Arsenal didn't look good. I mean, what was it?
I mean, is Arsenal being bad a surprise, or is it or just sort of accepted at this point?
Who is it who got sent off?
David Luiz.
David Luiz. I mean, his contribution to that match was
amazing,
absolutely horrific. It's just, I can't. I mean, David Luiz. Do you think he's finished? Do you think he's?
Oh yeah. Done? Well, he's a weird one, isn't he? He once upon a time, PSG signed him for 50 million, and he was actually pretty good at Chelsea. He's always been a technically gifted centre half, but he's never been a defensively gifted centre half. And I think that's
I'd seen some stats about his season last year at Chelsea, where I think the stat was that he played the most through balls in the league last season from centre back. I mean, that's the stat that really confuses me. He's a centre half. He was playing in a 3 at the back, sometimes 2 at the back, and was still, playing all of those through balls. I do think that if they pushed him forward, he might be fine again. That lack of needing to be the last man. But the moment someone starts running at him, he looks panicked. He looks like he just wants them to stop running and just does anything he can to stop it. And that's dangerous when you're one of a back two with Mustafi and yourself.
I'd quite like to see Arteta stick him in attacking midfield and see how he does. He could be
better than Ozil.
He could be decent if he doesn't have to defend. I mean, Ozil was pretty good at against Southampton. He did pretty well to sit in the stands and hold that parasol over him for 90 minutes. Same with Lacazette, really. But yeah, plenty of troubles at the moment for Arsenal. But I mean, in overall thoughts, the crowd noise. Lastly, I think we'll get onto the crowd noise. Unspectacular. Is how I would describe it. It's been pretty badly mixed. Sky had an absolute shocker the first couple of games. I remember it was Norwich Southampton, where Southampton scored their second goal and the cheers started about 4 seconds afterwards. Yeah. It's not been fast.
I think that's the problem. They've looked at FIFA and they've gone, the crowd noises kind of work, but in FIFA the game knows if the ball's going in, whereas on Sky it's literally a guy with a soundboard in front of him pressing the buttons going goal or no goal or whatever, and the delay has been the worst bit. And sometimes I've seen at points where they've played the wrong sound, like the goal goes in and they play like an ooh noise or stuff like it's missed. It's like it needs refined, and FIFA it works well because it's always accurate and it's always sort of on the time, whereas it just hasn't been as effective. And to be honest, I don't mind it in the middle of play. It kind of adds a bit of atmosphere, but for the goals and stuff, it's just not worked well because it's all been out of time and the wrong sounds and everything.
Yeah, I'm always put off by it. I was watching the Harry Kane goal, and it's sort of like he's running through on goal. He's ahead of the last 2 defenders going 1-on-1. The one against West Ham, this is.
Yeah.
In the 81st, 82nd minute or something, and the crowd doesn't start cheering until he's about to shoot. I mean, they would be up on their feet ready to celebrate as soon as he gets past that defender and is running through on goal. It's just sort of either train them before you start doing this, or have people who have actually been to football matches in the last 6 months doing it, because there seems to be a disconnect between when the noise should be played from a technical perspective versus when a fan would actually make that noise. Fans don't really cheer as soon as the ball's gone in the net. It's as the shot is going towards it that they start cheering. And then, it's those little things like adding in that effect of it hits the side netting but looks like it's gone in, maybe a bit of a cheer, then have the other fans like start laughing, and then an ooh at the end. Like, that's how it would go. Whereas it's just ooh straight away as soon as it hits the side netting, and it's not reflective of an actual football match.
Well, of course, one of the big talking points was the White Lives Matter banner that was flown over the Manchester City Burnley game. Of course, it doesn't represent all Burnley fans, but we all know that famous quote from the In-Betweeners. So make of that what you will, if anyone gets that reference. But yeah, overall, it wasn't good, was it really? But credit goes to Ben Mee, who in his post-match interview condemned it heavily. So, I mean, I guess the whole debate is, this Black Lives Matter on the back of the shirts and the players taking a kneel. Is it really doing enough to spread the message?
I think it's always going to be an interesting one, because there's a lot. I mean, obviously, I'm sure I speak for all of us in that we all support the movement, but there are people out there who don't, and there are people who feel as though through doing this it's kind of forced on them. And I feel as if that's because people don't quite understand what the movement represents. And I think, as you said, Ben Mee, I mean, in his post-match interview, the interviewer tried to speak about the match, and he said, I don't really want to talk about the match. I just want to talk about this and make it clear that that Burnley Football Club, that the vast majority of fans aren't about that. And people have made comments about it, saying, why is it wrong to say White Lives Matter when Black Lives Matter is a statement about one race? Whereas, we've got Black Lives Matter, which is this movement which wants to remove racial inequality in society, but saying White Lives Matter in that sort of context, it's not making a statement, it's making a sort of counter statement. It's going against the original movement, which is why I think it's offensive and why I think it shouldn't have happened. And I mean, I think the club handled it well with the statements that they put out. I mean, I think they were aware of it beforehand, as he may have mentioned in the interview, that there was a couple of like rumours and things that were going to happen, and they weren't really sure. So maybe more could have been done, or maybe word could have got out to somehow stop it, or if they knew this, then they might know the people involved. I just hope that they find the people who are responsible and hopefully do take the appropriate action that needs to be taken.
Should the company that flew it out be put under scrutiny a little bit? Because they're not idiots. If someone says, oh, can you fly White Lives Matter over the Etihad, you've got to question the decision making.
I would like to know if they knew that was going to be trailed on the back of it. I haven't looked into that. It's not really been my prerogative to learn more about the people who chose to do it and why they chose to do it or anything like that, because to give them that credit would just completely denounce why I support the Black Lives Matter movement, to give any airtime to them. But I don't think they get told, oh, by the way, we're just popping over Etihad with that on the back. I think that they pay the money to rent it and then hire someone to fly it for them. I would question the motives of every single person involved, but we get into dangerous territory when we start talking about should X company do more, should Y company, because ultimately it's not like this company has done it themselves and stuck their label all over it. It just was the fact that they were the one that they hired it from. It could have been any company.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit, disingenuous to the sort of outrage if we start pretending to be annoyed at the company, not the people who did it. Because if it turns out that the company knew and it was the company's own pilot who did it, then we can start asking that sort of question. Why did you agree to do it? But that's something for the investigators to find out, not for us to tittle tattle over.
I mean, I think we obviously need to understand a bit more about what happened, how it happened. But obviously, the main blame lies with the people who came up with the idea, who thought this was a great idea, who crowdfunded it and got it paid for. But at the same time, the company needs to think that their name is on that plane. Their name is known. It's like, I'm not going to say it because I can't remember exactly, but their name is out there. People know which company it was. And, you've got to look at brands and how they want to sort of position themselves within the industry. Obviously the Premier League and sports, and everyone wants to position themselves in a position with the Black Lives Matter movement. And, if the company knew about it, you would think that they'd be a bit crazy to go ahead with it. So perhaps they didn't know, perhaps they did know, but we just need to find out a bit more and some sort of investigation, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But obviously, if we move on from football, we have the fight camp announcements for the boxing. Week 1, the Eggington versus Cheeseman, probably the most entertaining pairing of names I think I've read in a while. They're competing for the IBF International Super welterweight. Then week 2 is Harper against Jonas in the WBC and IBO World Super Featherweight titles. Then week 3 is Cash against Wellborn for the Commonwealth middleweight. And then, of course, week 4, White against Povetkin in the WBC interim heavyweights. Now, I'm particularly looking forward to White versus Povetkin. I'm more of a heavyweight fan myself, so I don't know I don't know loads about welterweight, featherweight, and middleweight, but Dillian White is always been a rock solid contender in boxing, and Povetkin is a fantastic boxer on his day. So I reckon that could be an interesting fight. But what do we think about the fights? Is it a decent lineup? Obviously, I don't expect you guys to know everything, but about each fighter, because I mean, apart from Cheeseman, who else do we know really? But,
Eggington and Cheeseman. It sounds like a sandwich battle or something.
Yeah.
It really does. It sounds like one of those weird Walker's flavour combinations.
Like mashups or something.
Yeah, Builder's breakfast with Eggington and Cheeseman flavour. I mean, it's a decent lineup. What will Eddie Hearn have learnt from Dana White and the success or the relative success of the UFC?
He will have been watching it closely. He'll have been examining how they did it, what precautions they put in place, how they went from, nobody being in a centre to everybody being there. They'll put in those little things. I can only imagine that he will have to have worked fairly closely with certain teams and groups to get this all to go ahead, to get people there. And probably it'll be a case of, very, very strict guidelines, because I think the last thing they want is for it to go down as badly as it's not on the schedule today. So I'm just going to mention it in brief. The tennis stuff that Djokovic ran, if it goes as badly as that did, it sets boxing back quite a distance, because the tennis stuff was shambolic. The fact that they're still, passing blame around who's responsible for 4, 5 of the players now being tested positive, when, Djokovic was so crass about getting started again because he doesn't believe in vaccines and he doesn't think there's going to be a cure for this, even though he goes to some magic fountain of water to drink from because some doctor told him it works. Genuinely, not even ridiculing him. That's part of his problem. But yeah, I think Eddie Hearn's far more intelligent than Novak Djokovic. He will have done a lot of work to get this set up, and it will be safer than the tennis was. And I really hope it is, because I do want to see that Fury Joshua fight. And the longer we push boxing back by these things failing, the worse that is for that fight, because it will be still behind closed doors if we're not very lucky.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll be looking at it and looking at what done well and what they have. But I think as well, the UFC's return, because it was one of the first sports back, it did well because it was perhaps sort of the only sport on. Whereas now there is going to be a bit more variety. We've obviously got the Premier League back and, F1 starting next week. So he needs to look at how he can make it what boxing normally is. He doesn't just have that extra factor that it's only sport let on at the moment so people are watching. He's got to make it into a normal, sort of feel like a normal boxing event.
Of course, White Povetkin will be the most viewed one, I'd imagine, considering they're the most well-known fighters. But in terms of how this will be broadcast, we're interested to see if you just pay a pay-per-view for the whole thing. I mean, I'd imagine that would be the best way to do it. I don't think people with that bothered about paying for each fight. They'd probably be losing out money. So would you say probably just get one pass for it and then that would be it?
That would be most sensible, but this isn't sensible. This isn't a sensible sport. It will be probably sold week by week, maybe in smaller price packages for each fight, sort of an opt-in, opt-out type thing. So maybe you buy a full pass if you're definitely going to watch all 4, or you can buy, smaller passes that is maybe just for 1 fight or 2 fights.
Yeah, I mean, I think they will obviously be trying to make as much money as they possibly can, as per usual. Who knows? I mean, I guess it depends on broadcasters and whatever else is on, but it could be a good one to get. Maybe instead of being, a certain amount per fight, maybe make it twice what it normally would be for a fight, and then, have that for the 4 fights, so that kind of people are drawn to the ones which aren't maybe as well known, like Eggington versus Cheeseman. But I think there is like full cards, isn't there, on each thing? Cause I think Katie Taylor's fighting in that on the White Povetkin card, so it's going to be interesting to see how they do it. Anyway, who knows?
Indeed, who knows?
Who knows?
I mean, of course, if one of the interesting stories was of Sam briefly touched on was Novak Djokovic was diagnosed. Well, I say diagnosed, was tested positive for COVID-19 after organising a tennis tournament, basically holding up a middle finger to everyone saying stay safe. No distance. Was it no distancing? No nothing. It was.
The worst thing is there had been other tournaments before this, so this wasn't the first tennis tournament back. Battle of the Brits is going on. This is the semi-finals today, the final tomorrow, all being shown on Amazon Prime. Obviously, when this comes out, it will be over. But there are things going on, like exhibition, but for some reason, that was the only one where it didn't seem as, bothered. They were traveling, they were going from country to country. And, I'm not that bothered that they chose not to follow the rules because they were nowhere near me. And they were just clumped in together, staying together. If they wanted to be that stupid, fine, let them be that stupid. The problem for me is the passing the blame and the fact that Novak Djokovic is chair of the players' committee and is responsible for the conversations about getting the US Open started up again. And it was just such a stupid idea to start playing these tournaments without thinking of the rules that are in place globally. And already he's not taking responsibility. His dad's saying that whoever got tested positive first is responsible. So I think that was Grigor Dimitrov. And it's just ridiculous. And Novak Djokovic is very boneheaded. He doesn't believe in vaccines. He, as I say, he has this miracle water healer that, saves him from this disease. And him and his coach both getting it because of, the string of people who did is just stupid. Like, could have just, well, there was so many tournaments going on. There was a tournament the week before done in a pretty similar place, which was like a completely new, never seen before style of tennis, which was basically like 15 minutes rather than games and stuff like that. You literally just played out 15 minutes, so like 4 quarters, and you had to win 2 quarters or 3 quarters or whatever, and you would win the match rather than playing out sets and stuff. No changing ends, tie breaks. You only use the balls that you've held and stuff. But they go ahead and do this ridiculous tournament moving around. I think it was the Adria tournament around the Adriatic Sea. And it's just, for me, it's not. I'm not really that bothered about them getting back competitive with all of the elite players from around the world coming together. I've enjoyed watching the Battle of the Brits because it's just been, it's almost like what you would see at a local tennis club. 2 blokes turn up, play a bit of tennis, following the rules that the LTA give them, and that's it. The only difference is they have an umpire and Hawkeye compared to at a local level where you just call it yourself. But listen, I'm no fan of Novak Djokovic. I haven't ever really been a fan of him. I don't like his tennis style. I don't like him as a person particularly. So for me, it's quite funny to look at it and laugh because he will be still adamant to get the US Open played. But I know someone who is going to study the collegiate system, full scholarship in America, called Johannes Munday. Embassies are shut and America's locked down. He can't get in. That's a full, like, how they think they're going to get the US Open played a month after he's supposed to be started there and he can't go there. I have no idea, because if it's one rule for the top tennis players, this is a kid who could end up being one of the best in the world, and he can't go and take that next step in his tennis career because of COVID-19. So there should be a little bit more respect for the rules and for the other players in their sport, because people will have to retire at 20, 21, because unlike Djokovic, they don't have the money to go and travel the world playing the tournaments and stuff. That's the reality of a player outside the top 50 in the world, is that without sponsorship, without constant tournaments, they can't afford to pay to enter things, buy rackets, pay coaches, pay fitness staff, physios, keep training. These are the realities of it. Are if you're rich and quite good at tennis, you can do better than someone who's poor, can't get sponsorship, can't enter tournaments, but they're a miles better player than you. They just can't get the ranking points because you can't go and play tournaments. They may have the one-off that they go and play something in Vietnam in June one year. The next year they can't get there again. They lose those ranking points because if they go and play another tournament somewhere else but don't get to the same level, they go dropping down in the rankings again. It's one of the most ridiculous systems, and they've put nothing in place to keep amateurs and semi-pros on the tour. So I have absolutely no sympathy for Novak Djokovic, because this was just a money-grabbing method that failed, and God bless him. I hope he's sad losing a bit of money. Doesn't need it.
Well, I'm sure there's plenty of tennis fans that will agree with what you said there. Very impassioned speech. I might put that on Instagram. That was a fantastic clip.
Mm-hmm. I don't like him. I don't like his attitude. I don't like his tennis style. Yeah, he's always been. I always think whenever I've watched him, I mean, certainly in like big tournaments like Wimbledon, he's always seems so aggressive, especially when he's losing. If he's like a set down or something, he gets aggressive, and then he comes back and he shouts at the crowd. And it's just, a lot of the time, it's just like this theatrics, and it's just, I feel as if a lot of people share your opinion that they just dislike him because he doesn't make himself likable. It's not like Roger Federer where he's always respectful, he's always nice, even if he's not doing as well.
Nick Kyrgios as well.
But that's the thing, Nick Kyrgios is so polarizing, but at least he's entertaining.
Yeah.
Like, at least he'll throw in like tweeners, All right, it's annoying when he starts tanking, hitting the ball into the net and stuff, and not trying or pretending not to try because he thinks he looks cool.
I think he's more of a character than he is actually.
Yeah. But that's the sad thing, is I think he's quite content just being a character because it brings people in. Nike are fairly happy to have someone like him because at least he will constantly, whilst wearing their gear, be in the news. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those very sensible decisions. Rafa Nadal, always going to be winning your trophies whilst he's still playing at the top level. And Nick Kyrgios, who's always going to be in the news for doing something stupid. You get the perfect balance. You're constantly in the news. Whereas someone like Roger Federer was also Nike, weirdly. But now at Uniqlo, like you see Uniqlo everywhere. Suddenly they're, a fashionable brand, and he's wearing all of his like Sesame Street tops. I mean, the thing with Djokovic is nobody really likes him. So when he plays Federer at Wimbledon and the crowd are against him, he can't get his head around why. He sees it as, but I'm beating him, so I should be ahead of them. Like there was a point where he did something and got booed. So he just sort of started going like that to the crowd whilst playing Federer. And it's like, you want to get them on side. Federer is like 2 years away from retiring and you've still got loads of years left. Don't anger them now for the sake of one person booing you for doing something stupid. I think that he's probably going to be one of those people who comes back as a coach, a completely reformed human being, because nobody will want to hire him, really, if he's like this, because I'd imagine he's an absolute, I'm going to censor myself, but I imagine he's just a terrible person to work with off the court.
Well, I think that's enough.
Where do we go from there?
Tennis rants there.
You're welcome.
Sam really bringing in the content this week. It's super. He smashed it. Right, well, that's all we've got time for this week. Once again, thanks for watching. The support you've shown on the show so far has been greatly appreciated. Obviously, once we get back to university, we'll be able to use the TV studios again. So we'll have a much more dynamic show, I'm sure. But, of course, please like the video, subscribe to Live at the Quays. Any support is greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.